Hey there, Daphne, Haley, Lisa, Jeannie, good to see you guys again. Just taking a minute here and then we'll be ready to roll. Morning, Angelica, Monica, Mike. Okay, just giving everyone a few more seconds here. All right, everyone, so it's 11:10. Just going to get things started here. Thanks again so much for your attendance as we reach the last couple meetings of our semester. So everyone hopefully remembers and doesn't forget that you have to turn in that last homework today sometime. Anytime before midnight is fine, but just email it to me when you have it if you haven't already done it. And I'll be grading that one over the weekend. You should be good to know your grade on that and all the previous assignments by Tuesday at the latest. And then you'll be taking your final exam a week from today, next Thursday, the 16th, during the class period. So basically today we have a review session and then another one that comes up on Tuesday after the weekend. So 2 review sessions to kind of brush up on the study guide and go over all the topics and course notes one more time. Let me just ask somebody or all of you guys that are here. Hello, John, Mihaela, Thomas, everybody, Brian, Chase, Amanda, Ahmad, Eileen, Rory. It's good to see you guys. Jacob. Yeah, so did some of you notice my message which had the study guide? Let's make sure that everyone notices that one. Hey, Daisy, Lisa. Yes. Okay, you got it. Good. Perfect. So that's the document that we're going to use to focus on today and next Tuesday as we go over the over that study guide. So what I'll do right now in the Zoom feed, I'm going to share the screen, and with the shared screen, you're just going to see me pull up the study guide, and then me and your other classmates and you, we will all help each other go over as many of these topics as we can. And basically, I hope we can get through like one side of the study guide today, and then the other half of it on Tuesday after the weekend. So let me go ahead and get that part started. I'm gonna share the screen here. So give me 2 seconds to do that. Okay, so bring out the chat little bubble here. And let me slide this thing around so that it's not taking up too much of my space here. Oops. I thought I might be able to kind of collapse this a little bit. Maybe I can still do that. All right, there we go. Cool. And I got my speaker on just in case anybody ever needs to use the mic for any reason. Feel free to do that. So I guess right now, let me make sure everyone can view the screen, right? And you see what's displayed on mine. Yeah? Okay, perfect. So let's just go ahead and go over the topics that we see on this list. Now, there's a lot of us here, and we kind of, we can take advantage of the hive mind that we have. And if you feel that you understand the concept that we're going to talk about, just go ahead and provide me with the definition. I like with the review sessions for the students to take more of the lead. So for you guys to take most of the initiative to provide the information, but I'll definitely intervene as necessary whenever I think I need to add some details or correct something or just add more clarity. But but that's the way it's going to be. So today we're just going to go over one half of the study guide, and then we'll go over the other half on Tuesday. So yeah, let's go ahead and get this started. By the way, feel free to just leave a comment if you haven't done that, as we've done throughout the semester for your attendance, and I'll just keep track of that on my end. Okay, good. So let's begin. Any questions, anybody? Is anything that I haven't addressed, or not to worry? Good to see you, Diana. Thanks. Okay, just as always, and you guys know that, you can always cut in, ask a question, type something out in either of the chat boxes or using your mics, whatever you like. Okay, so we're going to start off then, and let's try to be like lightning round fast. If we get through it fast, maybe we'll end class a little sooner. It's not a typical day where we have lecture content, so as soon as we finish this study guide, then we're good for today. So those of us that are here, you can kind of anticipate the next question in the list, even while we're talking about the one before it. So everybody, you know that I'm going to start off with the post-midterm review information, the more recent material, and then we'll go over the first half of the topics again on Tuesday when we return. So my first question then from this study guide that you're looking at is the one at the top. So who knows what's a fallacy? Let me know. Okay, that's perfect, Jeannie. Yes, it's when an argument has a logical flaw or an error. Correct. So sometimes arguments are not good. When they're not good, we say that they have a fallacy or that they're fallacious. And different fallacies have been named and identified and studied throughout the generations and going way back, even thousands of years. So very good. It is when an argument has a logical flaw or an error. We're moving on then to number 2. What is a fallacy of ambiguity? This is the first of the 3 categories of fallacies that we all studied. So just let me know then, fallacy of ambiguity. Very good, Lisa. So when an argument contains ambiguous words, sloppy grammar, or a confusion between 2 similar concepts. That's right. Welcome back, Alex. Good morning to you. We're just doing our review session here. So far, so good. We've defined the first 2 terms in our list. Fallacy, when an argument has a logical flaw or error. Fallacy of ambiguity, when the argument contains ambiguous words, sloppy grammar, or a confusion between 2 similar ideas or concepts. So within the fallacies of ambiguity, we have a number of different examples. One is equivocation. So what is the fallacy of equivocation? Thank you, Jessica. When a key term in an argument is used multiple times, but with different meanings. Yes. So like if a person says, Joe's at the bank, banks lend money, so Joe is a place that lends money. That doesn't necessarily follow if the word bank was used in 2 different senses in the first 2 premises. Like on the one hand, saying that he's at a bank, which is like a maybe edge of a riverbank, and then the second premise means a financial bank, but of course, using the word in those 2 different ways, it no longer follows what the conclusion doesn't follow. Okay, next we can say, what is amphiboly? The amphiboly fallacy. Thank you, Jacob. When an argument has a grammatical mistake, allowing more than one conclusion to be drawn. Yes, sometimes there are little grammatical ambiguities or errors in our arguments or statements. But overall, a key case of that is where like a certain pronoun is ambiguous in terms of who it refers to. So if I say to you that my friends all went to watch the football team, but they weren't doing well. We don't know in that case what the plural pronoun they refers to, because I say my friends went to the game, to the football game, and they weren't doing well. It could be that it's the football team that weren't doing well, or it could have been my friends that weren't doing well who attended the game. So that's grammatically ambiguous. That's an amphiboly. Okay, so anyway then, fallacy of accent is another one. That's right, Jeannie. When the meaning of an argument or statement changes based on which word or phrase within it is emphasized. So in the fallacy of accent, a person could like change the meaning of an intended claim by emphasizing words differently. So in one example from our book, the parent comes home, sees that the garage has been burnt down, and knows that it's the daughter, so says to the daughter, "Why did you do that when I told you to never play with matches?" And then the daughter comes back and says, "But I wasn't playing with matches," adding that emphasis to the word playing, I was just setting things on fire with the matches. So obviously, when the mother says don't play with matches, they mean don't even use them or light them. But by adding emphasis and accent to the word playing, the child transforms the meaning as though it was only intended to say that you're not allowed to have fun and games with them, but you may still light them. Okay, so we've got next a fallacy of division. What's that one? Go ahead whenever you're ready. Just let me know who's got the information. All the information's out there. It's in 1 out of 3 places or maybe more: your mind, the notes, or the book, also in the lectures. Okay, Lisa, when one erroneously infers that a characteristic of a group is also a feature of each member of the group. Right. So the United States is very wealthy. You're a United States citizen, so therefore you're very wealthy. That does not necessarily follow. Just because the system that you're a part of has that quality, it doesn't mean that you, the individual member, have the same. So you could say that the football team is aggressive, so one player on the team is aggressive. Not necessarily true. No, there will never be multiple choice, John. It's going to be just like the past exams. You're right. Okay, so division. Just because the larger system is a certain way doesn't mean that the individual is the same. Okay, now what's composition? It's sort of the reverse of division, but you can say what it is. Composition fallacy. Okay. There you go, Mike. Thank you. A person incorrectly infers that because a member of a group has a characteristic, that the whole group has the same characteristic. Yes. So if I say to you that sodium and chloride are very toxic to humans, and therefore the compound sodium chloride is bad for humans, that's not true, because sodium chloride is just a scientific name for table salt, which is a common thing that we all consume. But the individual elements that form the compound are highly unstable and dangerous by themselves. So anyway, another case, the atoms that form my body cannot be seen without a microscope, and therefore I cannot be seen without a microscope, which is clearly false. So just because the individual little elements that form something have a quality or feature, that doesn't really mean that the whole thing has to have the same, and that would be composition. Okay, so what is a fallacy of relevance? Now we are on to the next category. So let's know. Okay, correct. Thank you, Jacob. So it's when one or more of the premises of the argument are not relevant or they're not related to the given conclusion. When you make arguments, your premises are supposed to be relevant to the conclusion that you're making, but if they aren't, then that's a fallacy. So there's a number of different fallacies of relevance. The first one we see, it's called ad hominem, and some people call that personal attack. So what is the personal attack or ad hominem fallacy? Anyone can tell me. Let me know whenever you got it. Ad hominem. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Lisa. So it's when someone doesn't agree with someone else's argument or conclusion, but instead of making a logical response, they form a personal attack against the person who made the argument. You say insults them. It sometimes is an insult, but sometimes it's just a reference to something personal, like, I'm really not going to listen to your argument on abortion because you're a man. Well, it's a personal fact about the individual who makes the argument that they're a man, let's suppose, but that does not disqualify their argument by itself. You're supposed to just consider the argument by itself without reference to the identity or any facts about who gives the argument. So, like somebody might say, we need to shut down businesses to stop the spread of coronavirus. And then somebody says, okay, well, I don't believe you. The only reason you're saying that is because you don't have a job. So why would you even care? But that's not really considering the merits of their argument. It's just making a personal attack. It makes reference to something personal as the reason that their argument must be wrong. So when you don't like someone's argument or conclusion, you should find what's wrong with the argument itself, and let's not get personal about it because it could be anybody that makes the argument. Okay, Correct. Good. So appeal to force, or we could call it scare tactics. What's that? The appeal to force fallacy. Okay. So somebody threatens to use or actually does use force to get someone else to back down and accept their view. Right. So like your boss says, if you want to keep working here, then you better vote for the so and so. Or one of your parents says, I'm so sick of you telling me that you believe in climate change. Maybe you should find a different place to live if that's the thing you want to believe. So it's basically trying to scare someone or use fear or intimidation to get them to back away from their own view or to switch to yours. But when you're making arguments and you're trying to be reasonable, you have to try and give reasons. You're not just supposed to say my way or else. So that's what appeal to force is all about. Okay, so then let's go ahead with appeal to pity. What's this appeal to pity fallacy? Pity is invoked in an argument, but it's not relevant to the circumstances. Yes, good. Some call it appeal to emotion, but anyway, in our book, we've called it appeal to pity. And yeah, officer, don't give me a ticket. I just got laid off, so it's been a very sad week for me. Or what if I say, Professor, please give me a good grade, because if you don't, my parents are going to be really disappointed with me and I'm going to cry. You have to just grade based on the assignments, even if there is something sad about the person's personal circumstances. Okay, so anyway, then pity. Popular appeal, what's that? Appeal to popularity. Correct. So a person appeals to popular opinion to support their argument or their conclusion. It would be like saying, hey, this is the best movie because it's got the number one box office total, or this is the right person to vote for because most people in my family vote for that person, or this this policy of teaching something in school is wrong because the majority of parents don't like those topics. So whether something's good or true doesn't just depend on how popular it is. It depends on reasons that establish whether it's good or true. So when we just point out that something's popular and that's the reason that we think it's correct, we're just engaging in a fallacy. It doesn't mean that popular things can never be right, but if they are, then there's a way of arguing for them independently of their popularity. Okay, so we can go ahead with appeal to ignorance. What's this? Person argues that something is true, but only because it's not yet been proven false. Right. If I said to you, look, we know there's got to be the Easter Bunny because I've not seen anybody prove otherwise. That's not an argument that proves anything. You have the burden of proof when you make a claim. So you can't just challenge people to prove that you're wrong and then your view is correct until otherwise disproven. So like if I say to you, there must be aliens somewhere in the universe because we've not been able to prove they don't exist, that's not really proof that they exist. Real proof is something that establishes existence, not the unavailability of negation. Okay, so we've got to move on to the hasty generalization. What is this? Okay, correct. Thanks, Jacob. It's when a person makes a universal claim, but they're doing it off of a sample that's either too small or it's biased or skewed, not representative. Say that maybe I have a friend and they have a dog which bit me one time. And then based off of the one experience, I say, dogs, they're just brutal and vicious animals. For example, I got bit one time by my friend's dog. That would be a hasty generalization, jumping too quickly to the broad conclusion that all dogs are like that. So that's just one, simple example, but there's a lot of examples that follow the same form where somebody too quickly, hastily, jumps to a sweeping generalization. So I got into a car accident, therefore it's just dangerous to drive at all. Maybe that's not so good. There is a lot of danger on the roads, but maybe off of just one incident, you couldn't generalize to the case that all driving is dangerous. at any rate, I think you guys get the basic idea here. So hasty generalization. What's the straw man? Okay, there you go. So somebody has an opponent, and the opponent makes an argument, but you actually take that argument and you distort it or misrepresent it so that it seems like it's easier to defeat it. Somebody says, we should, I don't know, let's say somebody believes that we should have, that we should not build a wall to prevent illegal immigration because it's wasteful financially and it doesn't actually have evidence behind it that it stops the flow of drugs and whatever crime. And then somebody says, okay, so let me understand you. You're saying we should just let everybody in and not even have any kind of border controls? Well, what kind of country would we be then? But that would be a straw man because in the original argument, somebody didn't say there should be no border control methods, just that they didn't believe a physical barrier was the proper one. On the other hand, you can imagine somebody saying that, we should have tighter immigration rules. And then somebody says, so what? We shouldn't let anybody in, but isn't this a nation of immigrants? I mean, bring us your poor, your tired, your huddled masses, as it says in the Statue of Liberty. So you just want to shut the door to new people? That's terrible. But in one case, the person's over-exaggerating that they say we should just let everyone in. In the other case, on the opposite side, someone's over-exaggerating that the individual's argument is to prevent all incoming migration. So either way, we can see a straw man here. And these are commonly seen in political arguments and in just everyday life. Okay, so next we have red herring. What is red herring? There you go. Thanks, Jessica. Very quick. So it's when somebody tries to sidetrack an argument by bringing up a different topic that's not even relevant. Somebody says to you, we need to get a handle on climate change. Don't you see the planet heating up because of all these greenhouse gases? And then someone says, no, I don't agree, because if you really think about it, the problem that we have is terrorism. But these are not the same problem, and it doesn't really prove anything to just try and change the subject. What if your parents say to you, you shouldn't be drinking so much. Drinking's really bad. And you come back and you say, come on, don't tell me not to drink. I mean, don't you understand there's some people out there that, they commit crime, like they go out and they just rob people. So at least I'm not doing that. That doesn't justify the act of drinking just because there's other things that you could have done that might have been even worse. So switching topics to something else that's maybe more favorable to you is red herring. You got to stay on topic and follow the conclusion through to its logical endpoint. Okay, so we've got another batch of fallacies next. Fallacies of unwarranted assumption. I think I may have skipped one thing. What's a fallacy of relevance? Did I not ask you that? Just overall. I think we did, actually. Never mind. Let me scroll up a bit. I might have forgotten. Okay, thank you, Jacob. We did get it. Yeah, sorry. Thank you very much. So anyway, just making sure I didn't leave anything behind. We've got to now ask about the fallacies of unwarranted assumptions. So there's another category. What are those? The unwarranted assumption fallacies. So you've got an argument which includes assumptions, but they're not supported by the evidence. That's right. You shouldn't make assumptions that you can't prove or that you don't have evidence for, and that's really the problem with all these ones. So first off, we have loaded question. And what's the loaded question? The loaded question, what is it? Okay, great, thank you. So somebody asks a question, but the problem is in the question, there's an assumption of an answer to a different question that they didn't ask. So it's like a loaded leading question. It's a question that, once again, it just assumes something. So like if I ask a person, like say I'm talking to a male subject and I ask him, who's your girlfriend? Now, how is that a loaded question? If I ask some guy, who's your girlfriend? Just following up with you, so if you can help me with that. It assumes the person's straight and that they're dating somebody. Correct. So it assumes that their orientation is that they date the opposite sex. It also assumes that they have a relationship. So it's kind of a double loaded question, that one. Um, I mean, I don't know. You guys in this current generation, people talk about, oh, someone assumed my gender just because of the way they look. They say, what do you like to do with all your guy friends when you guys are just hanging out as guys? Maybe you're assuming somebody's gender, or you're referring to them the masculine or male pronouns. Anyway, loaded question. Okay, so false dilemma. What is this? Okay, correct. So there's a complex issue, but it gets oversimplified to an either or, black or white binary choice. Um, so if a person said to you, look, um, you either um, you're either a patriot who proudly displays the American flag, or you hate this country, and I have not seen an American flag on your front porch, so I'm thinking that you hate the country. How's that a false dilemma? Either display the flag or you hate this nation. How is that false dilemma? Just thought I would ask, but let me know. Then we can move right on. Really? You got nothing for me? You still got to say something. I'm not going to let it go. So you heard my example. Is this stumping you? Is examples too difficult? It assumes that those two options are the only possible ones. Yes, generally speaking, Eileen, but you could have said that in any case, no matter what I had given. So let's just be specific. It's possible for a person to neither want to patriotically display the flag, but also to not hate their own country. Like you can love your country and just feel like it's kind of a little bit over the top to be putting the flag out there everywhere. Okay, cool. One thing here, let me just do something. Okay, so my next question for us is about the questionable cause fallacy. What is that? And just go ahead and you can, okay, good, thank you, Jessica. Let me get right to that. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so when a person assumes without good evidence that one thing causes another thing, that's the questionable cause fallacy. Sometimes we see it with like superstition and things of that kind. A black cat crosses somebody's path, then maybe they get into a car accident and they say, that must have been the reason that it happened. But obviously, there's no logical connection between the two separate events. So anyway, questionable cause. We like to think of things in terms of cause and effect, but sometimes we're too quick to judge that something caused something else, maybe just because it happened first, and then the other thing happened later. All right, so then it's slippery slope. What is the slippery slope fallacy? Okay, good. So it's the incorrect idea that if one type of action is taken or allowed, then eventually all of the actions like that will either be taken or allowed. Can anybody think of any example of slippery slope? Let me know. Let's see if you can come up with one real quick. What would be perhaps an example of a slippery slope? So, back to the immigration idea, Jacob, sure, I guess. If we don't tighten up the border, then what's going to happen is we will be overrun by a wave of migration, and we will no longer be able to have our own country, and our resources will be, plundered. So let's not even have any movement towards reconsideration of our immigration status quo, or at least make it stronger. John, you say if I fall, then I'll bleed. That's not a very good example, because it's not. There's no like further consequences. And by the way, it's pretty much true. I mean, if you do fall in a certain way, you probably will bleed because you might, cut your skin. It's a false prediction. Okay, Rory, if you legalize marijuana, people start thinking it's okay to give marijuana to kids and drive while stoned. We'll just be stoned all the time. Okay, there you go. All right, so John, you're going a little further with it. If I bleed, I'll get an infection. If I get an infection, I'll die. So it just shouldn't fall down. Fair enough. Okay, that's a little better now. Yeah, sometimes the gateway drug argument is given to people in terms of personal use. Sometimes in terms of policy, people talk about making policy changes will lead to a cascade of really negative side effects, but that's no evidence to show it. So, okay, guys, good. What's naturalistic fallacy? One more, last one. Yeah, so it's the concept or the idea that whatever is natural must be good, whatever is unnatural must be bad. That's not always true. I don't even know if it's usually true, to be honest. But so, for example, somebody might say, "This is a plant that grows from the ground. It's the coca leaf. So don't tell me there's a problem with me using cocaine. It's God gave it to us." Or I will never take any kind of pharmaceutical drugs because they're made in labs. So, whatever blood thinning medication that I need to prevent my heart from stopping because I have a blood clot problem, I won't take it because it's bad for me. But of course, it might be the only realistic course of treatment. Or say someone doesn't want to do chemotherapy or radiation because they think that's not given by nature. In that case, they might not be able to get their cancer into remission. So, even saying what's natural and unnatural is kind of hard to put a precise definition to. But even supposing that we had one, there are cases of things that are, reasonably thought to be natural that are bad, and cases of things that could be considered unnatural that are good. Okay, so let's continue from there. With the media and advertisement stuff, I only had a couple questions because we didn't have like a lot of lecture notes on that material, and you already had a number of homework assignments on it. But media literacy is the ability to understand the influence of media, to understand and interpret the influence of media on you. Product placement. Product placement is when the advertiser puts their advertised product where? Who knows this? Product placement. Where are they putting the advertised product or service? So in the programming itself, right? Instead of like during like official commercial breaks or designated advertisement time. So that would be like if you're watching a movie and they're drinking cans of Coke in the movie, or they're using Apple computers in the film, or a TV show where everyone's sporting, I don't know, Nike apparel. These are all done on the basis of licensing agreements between the broadcaster or producer of the media and then the vendor of the good or service. And so that's an effective way to advertise to us because it prevents us from being able to escape the ad by, like, say, changing the channel when the commercials come on or something. Okay, now 3 main purposes of ads. Does anybody remember that? Let me know if you got that information. Okay, product awareness, that's one of them. Yes, to create product awareness. Or sometimes advertisements seek to do what else? Yes, Jessica, to inform consumers about the product or service. You could add that little extra detail. So to create product awareness, inform consumers, and to motivate customer demand. That's right, consumer demand. So sometimes the commercial or advertisement just kind of reminds you that the product just exists. They don't even tell you anything about why it's good or desirable. It's just like the logo. In other cases, they try to motivate demand. Or sorry, let me go to the second one first. They can sometimes try to inform consumers about the product or service. So like they tell you, oh, here's why, this is the best car rental service, or this is why our product is the best, I don't know, car auto manufacturer on the market. We have like this kind of safety record, that kind of fuel mileage, and whatever other amenities they advertise about the car. And then the third possibility is to motivate consumer demand. And that can be done in all kinds of ways, like trying to make the product look sexy or cool or fun, maybe showing the people in the advertisement having the time of their lives while they're, drinking Coke, or maybe attaching a sweepstakes or contest to the purchase of the product. In all those ways, we try to motivate consumer demand, but not necessarily by just pointing out what the product does. Okay, so good. Now we can talk about chapter 12, which has to do with science and pseudoscience. As you guys know, we were just studying that pretty recently. So there's a lot of different assumptions in science. One is the assumption of unity. This assumption is that what? So it is the assumption that there's an underlying unity to the universe, which means that everything could be explained according to a single set of scientific laws. Yes. In science, the belief is that everything operates according to one set of physical laws, and we can eventually discover these laws, and they will allow us to explain all the things that happen, from the biggest to the smallest. Limitations of science. There are a couple of them. One limitation is that science can only study things that are what? Only the things that are observable, yes. Also, science assumes that something exists, but that can't be proven, which is what? The external world, right. It assumes the existence of the external world outside of our mind, but in the end, you really only know what you're thinking and feeling, and so you can't actually prove that it's connected to an external reality. Of course, we assume it is. And also, predictability could be criticized, the idea that the way things have happened naturally will never change. We can't necessarily know whether the facts of natural law will never change, but it's an assumption. Okay. Now, the scientific method, I guess, this question in a way, it could have been maybe worded a little bit better, but I'll just say this. The scientific method is a procedure that tries to establish testable explanations for observed phenomena. So we begin with observing things, and we try to proceed all the way to getting an explanation for the things that we saw. Now, how is the 3 levels of critical thinking similar to the scientific method? I asked a question like that, I think, on the recent quiz. And basically, what are the 3 steps of each? Well, there's more than 3 steps of the scientific method, but there are 3 of them that kind of match closely to the 3 steps of the critical thinking process. So ask, or tell me rather, what are the 3 steps of the critical thinking process? Those are 3 words we should be able to know. Okay, experience, interpretation, and then analysis. Yes. So experience, you just point out that something happened. You're not yet trying to determine why. Interpretation, you go ahead and try to give an explanation why or how it happened. And finally, analysis, when you go back to the interpretation and you ask whether it's the right one or is there a better one. So those different steps, they kind of mirror which 3 main parts of the scientific method. The experience, interpretation, analysis can be paired up with what? Correct, thank you. So Eileen, observation, hypothesis, and experiment. They're very similar because in the first step of both, whether it's experience or observation, you just take in a fact that's happening. You just note what is happening. At the second step of each, interpretation and hypothesis, you try for the first time to explain why that thing happened, to give your guess or your best explanation why. And then the third level of both is when you test or evaluate your explanation. Experiments test hypotheses, and analysis reconsiders and judges the interpretation. Okay, thank you. So to the next thing, there are different steps in this method, so let's go into them. What's the first one? Identifying a problem. How would you put that? How do you get it started? The scientific method. Okay, good. Thank you, Lisa. So you observe the world, you look at the world, and you just see something or identify something that's not understood, not explained. So you observe the world, you figure out some unexplained phenomena, and now your whole goal and the whole game is to get the explanation for the unexplained phenomena, like why it happens or how it happens. Okay, good. So when you go to the second step, developing an initial hypothesis, what's that? Developing an initial hypothesis. Thanks, Jacob. You make an educated scientific guess to explain the occurrence of the phenomena. So that's correct. You're just trying to now reason and give some kind of, estimate or judgment of what could be the explanation causing this phenomena. So when you get to the testing step, what is that? What is it to test a hypothesis? Testing a hypothesis? Anybody know this? Okay. You do conduct an experiment, and the experiment has the potential to either confirm or maybe it will not, in other words, disprove your hypothesis. So the test is all important. That is what allows us to see whether this hypothesis is likely to be true or not. If the results of the experiment match what the hypothesis predicts, then that's good if you confirmed it. But if the test that you perform does not match what the predicted results of the experiment would have been, then you've got to go back to the drawing board. But we'll talk about that in a moment. So that's the next question, really. What do we do if when we evaluate the hypothesis after the test? So you basically have to kind of report on what the different actions would be in case you got confirmed or disconfirmed. So let me know. Suppose you did a test and, okay, here we go, John. If the experiment confirms that hypothesis, then you should publish the results for other scientists to confirm in their own laboratories or in their own research. And if the experiment doesn't confirm the hypothesis, you say go back to step 2. But you have to say what step 2 is. So what is it? I know that we know it, but let's be precise. Right? Like what's step 2? Yes, to develop a new hypothesis. So if your hypothesis wasn't confirmed, then that's not the right explanation. It's time to try a different one and continue on until we get confirmation. Okay, good. So number 9 asks about one of the qualities of a good scientific hypothesis, relevance to the problem being studied. A good scientific theory or hypothesis should at least relate and be relevant to the topic that you're trying to research or study. So if you're trying to explain something about changes in the weather and you connect that somehow to, like, I don't know, financial markets, these two things really don't have anything to do with each other, and therefore that would lack relevance to the problem. Okay, so next, predictive power. A good scientific hypothesis can be used to do what? That's a little bit of a hint for you. To accurately predict future events. Yes. So good hypotheses and theories can be used to accurately predict future events. And there's lots of examples of that. For example, in astronomy, we know the precise dates and times when there will be things like eclipses or passing asteroids or comets. So when those things happen exactly as predicted by the scientific community, it shows that these are powerful and accurate theories. Meteorology is a branch of science which studies weather patterns, and we use the field of meteorology to base our weather forecasts, which generally, as you guys know, are pretty much reliable and accurate. So the accuracy of the prediction when the thing happens that was predicted gives credibility to that field of science. Okay, who was Nicholas Copernicus? What was his discovery? Let me know about that. Nicholas Copernicus. Just need to know his bio really fast. He is the Polish astronomer that discovered the heliocentric model of the solar system. But we have to fully define everything. What is the heliocentric model? What did it replace? Why was it important to discover that? It did replace the geocentric model, correct, but still, I don't know. What do the words mean? Okay, so heliocentrism means the sun is at the center of the solar system. Mike, here's how you say it. Polish astronomer discovered a heliocentric model, sun at the center. This replaced the geocentric model, Earth is at the center. Yes, that's all correct. And it was a powerful revolutionary result because it challenged the orthodox views of the church, which really insisted that it had to be that we were at the center of everything because God would not have wanted to make his children in his image in a non-central position. But anyway, we know that that's not actually true. Okay, so what is materialism in science? Another assumption of science. The assumption that everything around in the whole universe is made out of what? Materialism. Some call it physicalism, but just let me know. Thanks, Lisa. The belief that everything is made out of physical matter, even our consciousness. So some people think there's like a soul or whatever, but if you're a materialist, then you think, no, there's no such thing, because all there is the brain. And the brain is a physical object, so it's not something that is not something like a soul that lasts forever, that doesn't require a certain physical support. So if there's no brain, there's no consciousness, according to physicalism, according to materialism. Materialism says everything that exists is made out of matter. And even though we are conscious beings, we're just made out of matter too. Okay, so then what is science? Well, science is the process of reasoning from observable facts to testable explanations for the facts. So you start off with just stuff that's happening, facts, and then you try to eventually get to testable explanations for the facts. So explanations that explain the facts, but also that you can test so that you don't just have to take somebody's word for it. The test will show you that this is the proper explanation. Okay. I probably should have made this question on the list a little more specific, but what I'm trying to get at with number 14 here is what are the different attitudes people have about the relationship of science and religion? And there were 4 of them really that we talked about. So what are they? Different views about how science and religion relate to each other. Okay, correct. So Jessica, some say science should take priority over religion if they don't agree. So if the Bible says there was this biblical flood when Noah's Ark happened, and science says that's not real, that's just a myth, or the Garden of Eden in the Old Testament, it says that's the first 2 human specimens. But of course, science says this totally just completely false because we evolved. And when they don't agree, some say, let's go with science. That's the first view. Another view is that religion should get the priority. That's right, John. So some people would say, no, I'm going to go with a religious doctrine here, and I'm going to reject science. Others, according to, yes, Lisa, you're right. Some say that they're compatible with each other. So if that's true, that means that they really agree. If you somehow interpret them in the right way, maybe there's a lot of metaphor and non-literal use of language in the Bible, and we should just interpret it in a way that makes sense with science. And a final possibility is that they are dealing with different topics, so there's no actual conflict. Maybe science deals with the physical world and cause and effect, and religion deals with the spiritual world and our moral values. But anyway, then those are 4 different options that different people take. So continuing from here, what's the scientific hypothesis and what's a theory? What's the difference between them? So a hypothesis and a theory, how do they differ? How is a theory different than a hypothesis? Do we have this piece of info? I think we do. You know that a hypothesis is a what? Maybe we can start with that. Okay, very good, Lisa. So a theory is just a well-proven hypothesis. A hypothesis is just an initial educated scientific guess, but it hasn't been fully tested, proven, and replicated yet. So all theories kind of start off as hypotheses, and they graduate to the status of a theory when they have been well proven and confirmed. So theories are just hypotheses with a lot of proof behind them. And hypotheses are just, like the initial statement of explanation for something, but they may become theories if they get well established. Okay, next, gathering additional information to refine a hypothesis. This is the third step in the science method, according to the book. Now, basically, once you've got a hypothesis, sometimes it's necessary to make little edits or adjustments to it. After you start collecting data, you might have to make some little alterations to the hypothesis. Sometimes the hypothesis needs to be narrowed down to become more specific. So, like maybe somebody thinks that social media usage is driving up youth depression and suicide rates in this Gen Z generation. But then maybe as they start to study the facts and the statistics on the topic, they notice that it's not every type of social media use, but only certain types of websites. So they revise the hypothesis from social media to maybe like just photo sharing websites, rather than just, I don't know, like Twitter. So anyway, another case could be somebody thinks that video games contribute to gun violence, but then they start studying the topic and it seems like only certain genre of games do that. But anyway, I don't know if these are perfect examples, but you get the picture, right? That sometimes you got to make a hypothesis a little more tailored after you start to gather initial data. Next up, the quality of a good scientific hypothesis is that it should be consistent with the established theories. So what that means is that the good hypothesis will match or not match, but it will fit in. It won't contradict these other well-established theories. So you're supposed to build on what's already been there before. That means that a new hypothesis should not disqualify or cancel out other theories that have already been well established. Okay, what is falsifiability? Yes, it's the idea that a hypothesis is able to be disproven, correct? And it's a good thing. It's a good thing for a theory or hypothesis to have a way of being proven false, because it's only on that basis that one can test it to see whether it's true. You understand, when you do a test of a hypothesis, it's not a given that it's going to be confirmed. That means there has to be at least some way to gain a sense of whether it will be disconfirmed. But if you don't even know what disproves it, then you can't establish verification. So sometimes when people make claims, they're not falsifiable, and that's a giveaway that it's not a scientific claim. If astrologists tell you that, for example, there's nothing you can do to disprove their predictions, that means they're not making scientific predictions, because scientific predictions say to you, don't take my word for it, here's a test. And if you get a certain result from the test, then maybe I'm actually saying something that's not correct. Okay. It doesn't mean that it is false. It just means there's a mechanism by which you could prove it false hypothetically. Okay, now with the next one, simplicity, or some call it Occam's razor. What is Occam's razor? The simpler of two explanations is likelier to be true. Correct, yes. So the universe somehow seems to have a preference for elegance and simplicity. If there are two explanations for an event, the one that is simpler, which means it has fewer assumptions built into it, it's likelier to be true. I gave you an example about that, like saying that a person's car was missing from their parking space, and they could hypothesize that it was towed away, or they could hypothesize that it was abducted by aliens. But the alien abduction hypothesis is way more complex because it involves so many more assumptions than the other one. You would have to assume all these things that you don't know. For example, that there's aliens, that they exist, that they can travel to our planet, that they care about your car. None of those extra assumptions are required for the comparatively simple hypothesis that it was just simply towed. So anyway, maybe it's a silly example, but overall, the point holds across the board, that when you have two explanations, one is simpler, that's the one that's more likely to be true. Okay, predictability. The universe, we assume, is orderly and predictable. And that means that what? If the universe is all predictable and orderly, that means, among other things, what? Can you follow up with just a little extra piece of detail there? There's something that will be repeatable forever, but you should just tell me what it is. Yeah, established cause and effect relationships will never change. Um, so the force of gravity, we assume scientifically that that's not going to stop. It's not going to stop working the same way. Um, Inertia, entropy, um, I don't know, the behavior of elementary particles. We assume that those things continue to behave the same way they always have. So, like, gravity will cause an object to fall if it's dropped from a certain height. And it won't just do that now and today, but it will do that for all time if the same conditions are repeated. Now, I think when I gave this question on the quiz, some people gave examples that were not perfect. Like some people said, okay, the sun's going to come up every day. Not exactly, though, because the sun is not predicted to exist for all time. The sun's going to explode and it won't be there forever. So it's not the right kind of thing to use as an example. But the effect of gravity, for example, is thought to always exist forever into the future. So you have to think of something that's even deeper than like the rising of the sun or the orbiting of the moon, because all the things in the universe are finite and temporary, including the sun, the moon, and the earth. Okay, so next up, the assumption of objectivity. What is the assumption of objectivity? Assuming that we can what? Objectivity assumption in science. What is it? Okay, it's the belief that we can learn about the universe as it really is with no bias. Yes. The only thing I would add to your statement, Lisa, is as it really is. Because objectivity is this belief that there's an objective world out there and that we can learn about it not just as it appears, but as it actually is. And that we can do it with no bias. So scientists don't just think we're talking about our own personal feelings or our subjective views. In science, we think that there's just objective facts which we can discover by using reason. So that's it. Okay, now what is pseudoscience? Pseudoscience. It is a body of explanations that masquerades as science. Correct. So it's a field of explanation that wants to be perceived as being rigorous and scientific, but it actually doesn't have any new experiments or tests to confirm their claims. Their claims are not stated in language that's falsifiable. And so, anyway, fake science, yes. What are examples of it? We've got a lot of different types of fake science, including, so cryptozoology, that would be Sasquatch. Astrology, yes, the horoscopes. Numerology, the idea that, like, I don't know, numbers have some kind of significance. Tarot card reading, crystal balls, palm reading, psychics. Okay, guys, very good. Ghost hunters. So then there's Sir Francis Bacon was another important figure in the Western history of science. They give him credit for creating or inventing what thing? Bacon, the inventor of the scientific method. Yes, right. He wrote a book, Novus Organum, which provided the the details about the different steps in that scientific method, which of course we still use. Okay, and then finally, what's empiricism? The belief or assumption that where does most of our knowledge come from? Based on empiricism, most human knowledge comes from what source? Yes, most of it comes from the five senses and observation. Science is all about starting with observation and then eventually building a bridge to explanations for the observed things. But if we didn't think that our observations gave us knowledge, then science couldn't possibly work. So it assumes, anyway, that the five senses and the observation that we make with them can deliver us with real knowledge. Okay. So from there, the only leftover stuff is information from chapter 9. Um, ethics. What's ethics? Anybody know? Study of morality and moral concepts. Yes, perfect. Moral reasoning. What's that? Moral reasoning. It's a person making the choice about something. What? When you make a choice, decision about what is right or wrong, or what you should or shouldn't do. Yes. Suppose there was a student that was thinking of turning in a plagiarized assignment, and then they're worried about whether or not it was right. They're not just worried about whether or not they're going to get caught, but they're thinking about, what kind of person they are. They're like, am I really a cheater? Is this the kind of stuff that I'm going to do in life? And they wonder about whether it's right or wrong, or whether they should or shouldn't do it. Maybe they're judging another person's action. They saw that a friend cheated in their partnership, in a relationship, and they're, making a choice in their mind about whether that was a right or wrong thing for them to do, for their friend to do. So we all act in moral ways, and we are also moral judges. And so when we make moral judgments, that's called moral reasoning. We said that ethics is the study of morality and moral concepts. Moral concepts are things like good and bad, right and wrong, moral and immoral. So when we study those topics, that's doing ethics. Now, there are three main types of actions in ethics: morally blank, and morally blank. What are these three blank spaces? Three types of moral action. Impermissible, yes, that's the first, or that's one anyway. Another one, permissible, yes. And then finally, we've got obligatory, yeah. So there's something to say about each one. Morally impermissible actions are actions that are wrong and they're not okay to do. Think of killing, lying, cheating, stealing, rape, murder, torture, genocide, bad things that shouldn't be happening. Morally permissible acts are acts that are not wrong and they are okay to do. So watching a lecture on YouTube, going for a walk, chewing gum, sending money to charity, picking up litter. These are morally permissible. And then there's morally obligatory actions, which are actions that you must do, and it would be wrong not to do them. So keeping a promise, paying the bill after you've already eaten the food. Maybe we could add taking care of one's children that they've already brought in to their custody, and not doing the things that are impermissible. All right, now moral values. Values that are beneficial to all sides. They benefit you and others, but they're also considered good for their own sake. So that can be stuff like compassion, justice, altruism, forgiveness. Then there are non-moral values. These are values that um, are just more self-interested, they're goal-oriented, and they're only desired as a means to an end. So in that case, we have like fame, popularity, prestige, wealth. Um, Notice that both values are important to our lives and to living happy lives. We should also make sure to have a good balance of moral values because a life that's entirely self-centered can be a little bit unsatisfying after a while. Um, helper's high. It's a good feeling that people get when they help other people. So there's kind of like even some scientific evidence to show that for most normal people, we receive like a little infusion of dopamine in our neuroreceptors when we are helpful to people. So nature gives us a motivation and an incentive to be mutually cooperative. What's the conscience? Anybody know that? Conscience? Yes, thank you. It's this internal source of knowledge about what's right and wrong. Um, so we refer to our conscience when we're trying to know what we should or shouldn't do. It tries to lead us towards the right behavior and steer us away from the wrong behavior. Um, Moral sentiments. These are emotions which alert us to moral situations. They make us want to do what's right in those situations. So our conscience kind of helps to unveil the moral sentiments to us. One of those moral sentiments was the helper's high. Another is compassion. That's the ability to understand and care about the feelings of others. Um, what is the difference between moral outrage and resentment? So they're both bad feelings, um, of being upset. But a person's getting upset with moral outrage because they perceive what? Moral outrage is what? Yeah, you perceive an injustice and you get upset. So, I mean, all kinds of things happen that some people really don't like and that really upset them and make them feel morally outraged. So it doesn't have to be that it happened to you. If something bad happens in just society and you're an observer of that and you feel like it was wrong, then you can have moral outrage. Resentment is sort of like a sibling of moral outrage. It's another feeling of being upset, but it's because you are the direct victim of the unjust treatment. So resentment's a little more personal. It's when it happened to you. You could be a man during a time when women weren't allowed to vote or take on certain occupations, and you could have thought, that's not really fair. Women should be able to do the same things as us. But if you were a woman in that case, you would feel like you resent the treatment more than just being outraged. Okay, now there's also guilt and shame. These are two bad feelings, but they come from different reasons. Guilt is a bad feeling that you get from having committed a moral wrong, but shame is a bad feeling that you get from just, I don't know, doing something that violates a social norm. So, like if a person like belches in a classy setting or maybe in a classroom or something, they might feel a little shame, but they're not necessarily going to feel guilt if they couldn't control it because it's just a bodily function. Um, so sometimes when people get upset at others for the feeling of guilt, it's because they're mixing it up with shame, as if the person's just trying to enforce a social norm against them, but it doesn't correspond to morality. Knowing the difference between guilt and shame can kind of free us of the burden of our feelings of shame and distinguishing them from guilt. Okay, now there's different stages of moral development. Moral development is the lifelong process of acquiring your moral reasoning abilities. Let's just know the names of those three stages. What were those three stages of moral development? Pre-conventional, yes, followed by second stage, regular conventional, good. Finally, then we reach the third, and they call it post-conventional. Okay, yeah, now each stage of moral development is defined differently. The pre-conventional stage is when a person thinks that morality is all simply just about avoiding punishment. Um, so the person's really got a more self-centered focus when they're pre-conventional because they only do things that are right or don't do things that are wrong because of their concern with their own possible punishments. The conventional stage, the second, is when you start to try and fit into the norms and conventions of your society. So you go from fear of punishment to a desire for conformity. And then the post-conventional level is when you start to think that there are universal moral principles which you can apply, and that sometimes that they will even disagree with the social norms. Um, so post-conventional moral thinkers are those that are sometimes willing to go against the status quo or the grain. Um, they might like be the people who during the time of slavery said, this is wrong, or during the time of, women not being fully allowed their rights, saying that that was wrong. So all three stages are important, but they say that not everyone makes it to the highest stage. And a lot of people kind of stall out at number two. Now, there's different types of ethical theory. We've learned about moral relativism, moral universalism. What does moral relativism say? Relativism. Morality is or is not what? Okay, good. Thanks, Lisa. Morality is not universal. No, you got the wrong word, though, the second word. It's not universal or objective. It's relative. See, subjective means relative. So you want to change the wording there. The correct stated definition is that morality is not universal or objective, but it's relative, meaning that it's not factual what's right or wrong, but it just depends on it depends on something. We'll get into that. Moral universalism is the opposite of relativism. What does moral universalism say? Moral universalism, go ahead. Anytime now, go ahead. Sprint to the finish. Let's get this out. Okay, Jacob, there's an objective and universal moral code. It's the same for everybody. Thank you. Yes. To the moral universalist, there are facts about what's right and wrong. It's not just like a make-believe, fairy tale right and wrong. There's facts. There's objective facts. And where those facts come from, some people say from God, some people say from reason, some people say from just the universal human capacity to feel pleasure and pain. But yes, that's right. Some say that ethics is not relative, but it's objective. Objective. Okay, so next up, ethical subjectivism. So this is one of the two variants of moral relativism. What's the ethical subjectivism one? It says that morality is all just based on what? It's just nothing other than what? Just each person's personal opinion. That's right. So if I think it's wrong to have an abortion and you don't, then in ethical subjectivism, we would just say, different strokes for different folks. There's no fact here, but to one person it's wrong and to the other it's not. And so we can't say that there's an answer about the real answer. It's just different opinions. Cultural relativism says that morality is not defined by the individual's opinion, but instead they say that it's based on what? Cultural relativism, anybody? Yes, so based on the norm standards of your society or culture, right? So somebody might think that there's deviant, like weirdos out there that want to, commit all types of horrible acts, rape, murder, pedophilia, and so if people do those things and they believe in them, we don't want to say that that's good just because, even in their mind, if they think it's good, we want to say it's wrong. Now, cultural relativism allows us to say it's wrong because even if there's deviant members within the society, it's the standards of the culture overall that define the basis of morality. So because our society disapproves of those actions, they're judged to be wrong. What's the criticism, though, of these different types of relativism? Tell me what's the problem or why some people don't like these views or they find fault with them. What could be wrong with saying that morality is just relative? That's something that's going to maybe require you to think a minute because you can't just like look at notes and say, here's exactly what they wrote. You just think about it. What could be wrong with saying that morality is relative? It could permit wrong acts. That's right. So if you think that there's no fact about whether murder, torture, rape, genocide is wrong, it just depends on personal opinion or social opinion, then that's not strong enough because don't we want to maybe say that it's wrong, period, no matter what, no matter even if a whole society did it or even if certain individuals did it, it would still be wrong. To those of us who want to make a more strong moral critique of those types of behavior, then we would not be able to say so within the resources of relativism. Yes, Mike, some things are not right and they could be considered okay by a culture, whether that's child sacrifice, killing gay people, not allowing women to, drive. I don't know. There's all kinds of things that some people might say are wrong in and of themselves, regardless of whether there's whole cultures that practice these things. Okay, now, utilitarianism is an ethical theory. What do you know about it? It says that what's the right kind of actions? We should always be doing what? Act always to promote the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. Yes, that's right, Jacob. So in utilitarian ethical viewpoints, we should just try to do whatever creates more happiness rather than less. And if you have a set of options, what's the right option? They would say just do whichever one is going to make the most happiness exist. Who are the founders of utilitarianism? There's two big players in the early history of utilitarianism. I don't know if any of you guys know these names or if you can remember at least one, but let's see. John Stuart Mill, very good. John Stuart Mill, British economist and philosopher of the 19th century. There's also Jeremy Bentham. He's mentioned in the textbook. You'd see him there. It's another British man who's also in the same time period as Mill, but actually about 30 years older. He also talked about utilitarianism and consequentialism. Immanuel Kant. So Kant's ethical system, he's a German philosopher. He lived from 1724 to 1804. He's considered probably the main theoretical rival to Mill and the utilitarians. He says that morality, it's not about promoting the most happiness, but instead it's all about acting according to the moral law from a sense of duty. Now, what the moral law is, according to Kant, can be revealed to us by thinking of this principle he calls the categorical imperative. Now, does anybody know what's the categorical imperative? It would have been information both in the book, but also in the lecture that I posted for Tuesday. So maybe someone can dredge that info up. There's two versions of it. So let me know if you can give me that. Okay, thanks, Lisa. Yes. Always act so that your maxim could be a universal law. I know that looks like a little bit of jargon there, but to sort of translate that, it's simply saying this: when you're doing things, you've got to make sure that the action that you're doing would still be okay or possible if everybody did it. Okay, so if you're doing something that would break down if it was done by 100% of people, then that's wrong for you to do. Like, so if I wanted to, I don't know, like not pay the fare when I take a subway ride, then it only works if I do it, but not everybody else. Because if everybody does the same thing, then nobody's paying for the subway and it will no longer be able to run because it won't have funding. Now, of course, the free rider does want for there to be a subway so they can ride on it for free, but they wouldn't be able to do that if everybody was doing the same thing as them. So they don't even want everyone to act the way they're acting, and that's how they know it's wrong, because they could not wish for this to be universal. Or if you want to cut the line to get closer to the front of the building, that can't be done by everybody, because if all people cut the line when there's a long line, then there's no longer any line, but just a melee of people towards the entrance. And the cutter doesn't want all the other people to cut, because if everybody cuts, then once he or she cuts, they'll get cut in front of. So anyway, categorical imperative, guys. It just says only do things that could be done by everybody too. And if they could not be done by everybody and it would still work, then you shouldn't be doing it. There's another version of the categorical imperative as well, just to throw it out there. The second version says to never treat a human being as a means to an end. And that means that you're never supposed to use people or manipulate them to get things. So if I I don't know, rob somebody for their money, I'm using them for my own enrichment. Or if somebody committed rape against a victim, they would be taking advantage of their body for the sake of the pleasure they're trying to get. But that's not okay, because human beings are not just objects, they're subjects, and they should be respected as such. So anyway, the categorical imperative, version 1, act only in ways that could be universal. Version 2, don't use people to get to your goals. Now, from there's just 3 more terms. We talked about rights in that little recorded lecture, and it's in the book as well. There are 2 main kinds of rights that are often referred to: liberty and welfare rights. So let's know if you can tell me, what is a liberty right? Rights to what? Yes, right to be left alone to pursue your legitimate interests. So liberty rights don't mean you're given anything. They mean that you're not going to be interfered with as you do things that you're entitled to do. So they're rights to not be interfered with. What are welfare rights? Those are rights to be given certain essential things if you couldn't provide them on your own. So that's the right to receive things. Okay, so question, what would be the right to bear arms? Liberty or welfare? It's a liberty right, because it doesn't mean you have a right to be issued a gun. It just means that you have a right to not have it taken away if you decided to privately own one. What would be a right to drinking water? That's a welfare right, because it requires that you be provided with such if you don't have the means to get it on your own. What would be the right to, let's see, to have an attorney at trial? It's another welfare right, yes, because if you can't afford an attorney, we say in our system that you're going to be given legal representation by a public defender because you have a right for legal representation. What would be the right to practice whatever religion you want? Liberty right, yes, because it just means people can't interfere with you as you exercise your religion. Or I'll just maybe ask 1 or 2 more. What would be a right to marry who you would like? Another liberty right, yes, because it means that the state cannot interfere with your union if you wanted to have one. It doesn't mean that you're provided with anything, that just that you're not interfered with. Okay, both kinds of rights are important. Liberty rights like the freedom of speech, assembly, religion, um, ensure that we can't be prevented from doing things that we have the right to do. And welfare rights ensure that when we're not able to provide such things as education, food, water, legal counsel, healthcare, I said education, healthcare, then in those cases, the state has to provide such because they're essential for our survival. Okay, now finally, the last question is virtues. What are virtues? Virtues, they're desirable character traits. Perfect, yes. And so these are the sort of things that you'd say if you wanted to compliment a person's character. Um, so virtues include things like generosity, kindness, courage, um, I don't know, patience, any of those different things that maybe your parents would say about you if they're really proud of the kind of person that you grew up to be. So positive and desirable character traits. Some people say that's the right way to live ethically, to just try and embody all of these traits and to build them up in your life. So anyway, guys, good. We've covered this half of the study guide, and we have 2 of these review sessions. So this is just part 1. So I'm going to probably close the stream here in a bit, and I just invite you to come back for part 2, um, which will be, next Tuesday after the weekend. I'll post the link to that Zoom class, and I'll also post the recorded version of this YouTube lecture after this class. Later today, I'll also have my office hours posted, which they're always on Thursdays from 4 to 5, if anyone had any reason to come. But other than that, I think we're good for today. So don't forget that you have to turn in that 4th homework anytime before midnight today. Just email it to me. And other than that, I'll be in touch through email if you need anything over the weekend. So let's just wrap it up. Are we all good? Let me know. And if you say so, then I'll close these 2 streams. Okay, thanks again, everyone. Really appreciated your hard work all semester, and we're almost to the end. So take it easy, and I'll see you then next time. Okay, have a good one. Bye. Okay, signing off here. Thank you, guys. Okay. And here we go. See you soon, all the people watching on YouTube. Thank you.